protecting its pachyderms, an uphill challenge for the island nation. All this and much more on Inside South Asia.
I think bringing perspectives from journeys of various entrepreneurs or business leaders will allow, aspiring young entrepreneurs as well as, people who track businesses to get a better understanding of the stories behind the creation of these businesses, as well as the philosophy and the perspective that these business leaders have.
The US race to power, marked by high-octane campaign rallies, life-threatening encounters, game-changing presidential debates, the color and the drama, the key defining moments, deep insights and informed analysis. Watch continuous coverage of the US presidential elections 2024 on WION World is One.
Welcome back. You're watching WION The World is One. This is World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar. Let's start with the headlines first. Iran emphasizes its right to respond to Israel's strike in due time, also stresses the need to establish a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon to ease the suffering there. Glass and smoke seen over South Beirut as Israel carries out attacks soon after a fresh evacuation call. Israel claims Hezbollah fired 190 rockets into Israel from Lebanon, saying all were intercepted. 9 days to go for voting in the U.S. elections, and campaign temperatures peak. At a Democratic campaign rally in Michigan, former First Lady Michelle Obama airs what she calls genuine fear that Trump could retake the White House as she rips into Trump's record. Voting underway in Japan's tightest election years, with Prime Minister Ishiba and his juggernaut Liberal Democratic Party facing potentially their worst result since 2009. Will the LDP and its coalition partners hold on to a majority is the question. Georgia's ruling party celebrates victory, having won nearly 53% of the vote, as per the country's election commission. However, the pro-Western opposition has rejected the results as quote-unquote falsified. Once again, the Iranian military has released a delicately worded statement on Israel's attack early on Sunday, which suggests that Tehran may be open to a true solution over further escalation of conflict in the region. While highlighting that it had a right to retaliate, Iran said that a ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon was more important than any retaliation against Israel. The Iranian military put out a statement via its official channel. Listen to this.
در اطلاعیه ستاد کل نیروهای مسلح ضمن تاکید بر محفوظ دانستن حق پاسخ قانونی و مشروع خود در وقت مقتضی بر لزوم برقراری آتشبس پایدار در غزه و لبنان برای جلوگیری از کشتار مردم بیپناه و مظلوم تاکید شده است.
Scores of Israeli jets completed 3 waves of strikes before dawn against missile factories and other sites near Tehran and in western Iran yesterday. However, in the statement, Iran played down the attack, saying it caused only limited damage. Iran's military said the Israeli warplanes used very light warheads to target border radar systems in the provinces of Ilam, Khuzestan, and around Tehran. Further, Tehran said Tel Aviv used Iraqi airspace to launch its strikes and added that it is under the occupation, command, and control of the U.S. military, thus coming to the conclusion that the U.S.'s complicity in the crime was certain. Meanwhile, as U.S. President Joe Biden hoped that Israeli strikes against Iran are the end, Vice President and Democratic presidential candidates Kamala Harris called for de-escalation in West Asia.
A couple of hours ago, I got off of a lengthy and important conversation with the president and our national security team. And of course, we maintain the importance of supporting Israel's right to defend itself. And we are also very adamant that we must see de-escalation in the region going forward, and that will be our focus.
Meanwhile, France and the UK have urged the parties against any escalation and action likely to aggravate the context of extreme tension prevailing in the region. On the other hand, Arab and Muslim nations and the Hamas terror group condemned the Israeli assault. Jordan called it a violation of international law and Iran's sovereignty. Egypt expressed grave concerns over the attack, adding that it threatened regional security and stability. Turkey, on the other hand, stressed on putting an end to the Israeli terror in the region and said it has become a historical task for the establishment of peace and security. India reiterated its call to all parties to exercise restraint and return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy. Meanwhile, thousands on Saturday joined relatives and supporters for the weekly rally in Tel Aviv, underscoring that Hamas has been defeated. They asked why has the government not presented any initiative for a deal which would bring all the hostages back home. All right, to discuss more, we're being joined by retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, live from Sterling in Virginia. He is a military expert and the host of Daniel Dave Deep Dive on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us this time. And now the statement released by Iran after Israeli attack has stressed that necessity of establishing a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. Do you think there is a possibility of ceasefire now?
Well, we have to hope so. I mean, there's no military solution to this fight. Israel has undertaken a course of action which militarily can't be accomplished. They just can't kill everybody, which is the only way you get a military solution. So that leaves the only path to any kind of peace or security for the Israeli state, and certainly for the Palestinian people, is through negotiations. So I know that Secretary of State Blinken has been crisscrossing the area. He's talking to people even as recently as today, trying to get a ceasefire in both the Gaza Strip and in southern Lebanon. And that's really the only chance that anybody has for peace, because if we don't take advantage of this, then the killing is going to continue to go on. Israel is going to continue to be insecure, and they're going to continue to suffer casualties and all the losses that go with war, and there won't be any end in sight. So we certainly have to hope that's what happens.
Right. And how do you think Israel will respond to this statement as well? Because PM Netanyahu, who has been called for the hostage release and all, how do you think Israel will respond now?
Well, so far, the Israeli government has been very, very resistant to any kind of ceasefires anywhere. They have not taken much proactive action at all to try to get their own hostages back, which is why you see so many protests inside of Israel, especially among the family members. And even though this strike against Iran here was relatively tame in comparison to what it could have been, it has come at the expense of some of the supporters of Israel within the government. Ben Gvir and several other, Benny Gantz, to name two specific ones, were both adamant that this strike needs to not have been the end, but a beginning, and they want to continue pressing to have a victory in a war with Iran, which is just it's not in the cards. And if they continue going down that path, all it's going to do is expand the war, which, as the president of the United States said today, is not in American interest and what we're trying to avoid. So I think we dodged a bullet for the moment, but the danger is definitely not gone.
Right. Now, you mentioned U.S. Now, it has been successful in restraining Israel attack in Iran. Will it be able to do so in Lebanon and Gaza and move towards a ceasefire?
Well, I think there's some limited influence the United States has had. They seem to have had some this time, but they didn't have any influence over Israel when they attacked the Iranian embassy last April, or when they assassinated Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, or when they went into Rafah in the south against some of our wishes. So you see, most of the time they don't listen to the United States. It does appear that they did this time, because the statements by the Israeli leaders going into this strike were very strong and saying they're going to be very lethal and targeted and all this kind of thing. And then that's not what we saw. So the assumption being that this time U.S. pressure did have some success, but I doubt very seriously whether that's going to translate into a ceasefire in other places, because the Israeli government doesn't appear to want a ceasefire. They want to keep trying to have a military solution. So I would like to see it, but evidence tells me in history that we're not going to succeed.
Right. We know U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is in West Asia for talks towards ceasefire. Considering the U.S. elections right around the corner, how much is at stake for U.S. now to get this ceasefire done?
Honestly, I think that the administration, they just want things to stay stable. I think they were, couldn't have been any happier that there wasn't a big Israeli response here right before the election. Whether they take action on the other side remains to be seen. If the administration is willing to be tougher with Israel on the other side remains to be seen. But I think that their primary interest right now is not getting a ceasefire before November 5th, but to make sure nothing bad happens between now and November 5th.
Right. But looking at the result after the elections, whether the Biden administration or Trump comes in, what would it look like after that then?
Well, if Trump were to somehow win the election, then that would give a lot more freedom to the Democratic side, the current administration, because they would no longer have to worry about placating any particular domestic constituency, because the election will already have been done. So they'll have a little bit more of a free hand to potentially use more leverage against Israel and open up, because they will have less risk. If the Kamala Harris wins the election, however, I think that you'll still see basically a perpetuation of the status quo. I mean, the administration will just switch, from the vice president to the president, but the policies will probably remain the same. So it probably the only thing that's going to be different is if the administration, if Harris doesn't win the election, you might see more, especially of Biden, who also, he's going to leave office one way or the other. But if Trump wins, he's been pretty emphatic that he'll do whatever Israel wants as well. So it may not have any real impact at all.
All right. Thank you so much, Colin Davis, for joining us and giving us all the details.
You bet. Thank you.
With tens of millions of ballots to be cast on November 5th, the U.S. presidential election is poised to go down to the wire. According to CNN's latest nationwide poll before the election, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Kamala Harris are tied 47% each among likely voters. The poll was conducted by phone between October 20th and 23rd among 1,704 registered voters. It has a margin of error of 3.1 percentage points among likely voters. Keenly aware of this, both the candidates, Trump and Harris, are turning to famous venues in a last-mile dash to woo voters. In fact, they are leaving no avenue untapped. On Sunday, former U.S. President Donald Trump is returning to his hometown of New York for a rally in one of the city's most iconic landmarks, Madison Square Garden. Notably, New York and Madison Garden have always been hostile to Republicans and the former president himself. Trump had lost the state by 23 percentage points in 2016 and 2020. The New York courts have handed him 34 felony convictions and fines running into millions of dollars. But this time, Trump, who has made his name in New York, has asserted that contrary to the polls, he will carry the state. On the other side, 2 days after Trump's rally, Vice President Kamala Harris will address the event at the Ellipse, the park on South Lawn of the White House. And the venue is significant. This is where one of Trump's fiery speeches nearly 4 years ago set the stage for the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Business leaders also seem to be aware of the implications of calling the election wrong. On Friday, the Jeff Bezos-owned Washington Post said it will not be endorsing a presidential candidate in the 2024 election. It also said its billionaire owner, Bezos himself, made the decision to refrain from endorsing Trump's rival, Harris. Now, curiously, the announcement came on the same day as when Trump met with leaders from Bezos-owned aerospace company Blue Origin after his speech in Austin, in Texas. The Washington Post had endorsed Trump's opponents in 2016 and 2020. Also, it has endorsed a presidential candidate consistently for at least last 30 years. In other global news, results are out of the Saturday's historic parliamentary elections in Georgia. The ruling party, the Georgian Dream, has claimed victory with a strong lead as counting of votes are almost complete. The pro-Western opposition bloc has, however, alleged the results have been quote-unquote falsified. The members of the incumbent party, Georgian Dream, began their celebrations in the capital, Tbilisi, after the country's election authority, the Central Election Commission, announced that the ruling party has secured nearly 53% of the vote. Furthermore, authorities said that 97% of the vote have been counted so far and is yet to count the votes of Georgians living abroad. Georgia's opposition parties, including the United National Movement, have disputed the election results. The opposition has rejected the results after alleging them as falsified. Now, amidst this, images of dozens of men reportedly belonging to the Georgian Dream attempting to storm the opposition party's headquarters have gone viral. They're seen driving away in cars with flags of the ruling party. The parliamentary elections in Georgia is a critical litmus test for the former Soviet Republic. It will determine whether the country will lean in favor of the West or towards Russia ahead. Moving to Japan, where voting today is in one of the most hotly contested parliamentary elections in its history. Voting is currently underway now. This election marks the biggest ever challenge to the ruling LDP, led by new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. The polling began at 7 a.m. local time and is set to carry on till 8 p.m. local time in the evening. Now, according to reports, preliminary results are set to come out late at night. The elections come at a time when the ruling party has been slammed with allegations of several high-profile scandals. In addition, voters have also been disgruntled with the ruling party over rising prices, inflation, as well as ties with China. Now, pre-election opinion polls have predicted that the incumbent Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and his LDP could be ousted from office for the first time since coming to power in 2012. There are even indications that the LDP might not even secure a majority in the parliament's lower house. Ahead of the parliamentary polls, both the ruling party and the opposition Constitutional Democratic Party, the CDP, held rallies in a bid to secure voters' confidence on Saturday. Moving on, Xi Jinping may have a new military secretary, and this has been suggested by a state footage released this week. Lieutenant General Fang Yongxiang was part of a group accompanying the Chinese president during a visit to the country's elite PLA rocket force. The footage shows Fang as one of the two generals accompanying, not wearing the rocket force uniform. Reports say that Fang's inclusion in Xi's visit entourage suggests that he is now the Central Military Commission General Office Chief. Fang was appointed a member of the PLA's election committee last month. He's a native of Xiamen in Fujian, the southeastern province, where Xi rose through the ranks in the 1980s and 90s. His military career started in 1989 after he graduated from the PLA's Army Infantry Academy. Fang started as a platoon leader and a company commander at the 31st Group Army, a division under the PLA's Eastern Theater Command that oversees the Taiwan Strait and the East China Sea. In 2018, he was promoted to vice minister at the newly set up Ministry for Veterans Affairs. In July 2022, Fang had called on all veterans to oppose the use of extreme moves to petition and stage mass gatherings. His comments came at the ministry's first ever press conference after former servicemen and women held several large-scale rallies seeking better retirement benefits. The ministry was established to better handle welfare for China's 57 million former armed forces personnel. Moving to Pakistan, where officials have reported that a suicide bomber targeted a security checkpoint in a volatile region near the border with Afghanistan on Saturday, killing at least 8 people and injuring several others. This is one of a spate of such attacks in Pakistan over the last few days. The latest attack occurred in the town of Mir Ali in Pakistan's militancy-hit North Waziristan district. At least 2 soldiers, 4 police officers and 2 civilians were said to be among the dead. Multiple area security officials confirmed the casualties, reporting that the bomber detonated a motorbike rickshaw filled with explosives at the checkpoint. The explosion also injured 5 security personnel. Local hospitals are describing the condition of some of them as critical. Just a day before this, the Pakistan Taliban took responsibility for an attack on police personnel near Afghan border. According to a report, at least 10 policemen were killed in the attack by an on-post of Frontier Constabulary, a police assistance force. The latest attack also comes after Pakistani security forces carried out an anti-terror operation in the volatile northwestern region that borders Afghanistan. After a fierce gun battle, 9 terrorists were killed in this operation. Acting on intelligence reports about presence of terrorists in the Bajaur district in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, the security engaged with the terrorists, eliminating 9, including 2 suicide bombers. While there has been an uptick in terrorism cases in Pakistan, in August alone, the country witnessed 59 terror attacks. In July 8th, Pakistani soldiers were killed in a military-based suicide attack in Bannu, North Waziristan. In March this year, 2 Pakistan soldiers and 8 terrorists were killed in an attack on Gwadar Port Authority complex. While in February, 28 people were killed in twin blasts in Pakistan's southwestern province of Balochistan. The Pakistani officials have reported a dramatic surge in TTP-led gun attacks and suicide bombings in the country, particularly in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa border province where North Waziristan is located. According to independent research reports, the violence has claimed the lives of more than 1,000 Pakistanis and half of them security forces in the first 10 months of this year. The Typhoon Trami has brought Philippines to its knees. The number of dead and missing in massive flooding and landslides triggered by the powerful storm has exceeded 100. Trami blew away from the northwestern Philippines on Friday, leaving at least 82 people dead and 34 others missing. It is one of the Southeast Asian archipelago's deadliest and most destructive storms so far this year. As many areas remain isolated with people in need of rescue, dozens of police, firefighters and other emergency personnel have been carrying out massive rescue and search operations. The Philippine government has shut down schools and government offices for the third day to keep millions of people safe on the main northern island of Luzon. Inter-island ferry services have also been suspended, leaving thousands stranded. More than 4.2 million people have been in the path of the storm, including nearly 500,000 who mostly fled to more than 6,400 emergency shelters in several provinces. It is the 11th tropical storm to have hit Philippines this year. Chinese coastal cities have also continued to issue warnings for the strong gales and heavy rains triggered by Trami. Authorities say the typhoon has moved into the South China Sea. Affected by cold air and the typhoon, the coastal areas of Fujian, Zhejiang and Guangdong provinces and the Taiwan Islands experienced gusts with heavy rains in some places. The heavy rains have led to suspension of public transportation as well. The tropical cyclone is forecast to keep moving westwards and slightly increase its intensity to reach typhoon level. Remember, this is the 20th typhoon to have hit China so far. Right, Nigerian Afrobeat superstar Davido made a surprise appearance at Lagos Fashion Week 2024. Know about this in our next report. We leave you with his visuals.